So this is a bit kind of a follow-up question to something that you mentioned in the ants episode. At one point, this was sort of in the discussion where you and Tashara were talking about favorite jobs. And part of it, you mentioned that you were having some troubles kind of with the ways you feel about yourself in terms of like feeling successful right now, having left a career.
Those are questions that I've asked myself a lot, particularly over this last year. And it's funny that we're recording today, actually, because before we came on, you said, how's your day been? And I said, oh, it's actually been really busy. And one of the reasons it's been so busy, it's been great, but it's been so busy. I was in Boston. I had my last day in the office for one of my consulting jobs.
Okay.
Which my contract ends May 30th. And so today was my last day in the office with them. And so I've been kind of really trying to kind of think deeply about kind of what my next professional steps are outside of the podcast and what is motivating me to do those things. And I think as someone who's interested in a lot of different things, and as someone who thinks a lot of the systems that we operate in are total bullshit, I often feel in conflict with myself. And so I think at least that was what I was probably trying to say in the ants episode, that I don't miss lawyering. I miss aspects of teaching and I miss aspects of mentoring. I miss some of my colleagues, but I don't miss working in that environment. I did it for a long time and was successful at it, and it was over. And I feel very at peace with that decision. I miss some of the routine. So routine is important, and I miss that.
Yeah.
I miss having a salary. I miss the place that I held in my family, even if my family didn't know that. Like, all of my kids were insured through me. I felt very proud of that. We had really
Yeah.
good health insurance. And at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff that was important to me actually isn't important to me. And so that is something that I have been just kind of sitting in and kind of trying to figure out, what do I miss? Do I miss it? Do I miss how it made me feel when I told other people that I was a professor?
Yeah.
And if that's what I miss, then I really don't want to do it, because that is not the person I want to be.
Yeah.
And
I'm,
so I definitely miss how proud it made my parents. Um, and I know that they're trying to be proud of me now, but they were more proud of me when I was a professor. And even at 43, I can also identify, like, it doesn't matter what my parents think. I am, from my own definition, a successful person,
yeah.
um, and doing things that are right for me and right for my family and right for my community in my particular lived experience. But we're all children. And like, there's nothing better than your parents being proud of you.
Oh yeah. You said in other times like, I shouldn't have been a lawyer. I shouldn't have gone, it seems like there's, at least a lot of parental influence on
Oh,
becoming
for sure.
a
Like, I
lawyer,
had
right?
no choice but to be a lawyer. I had a choice, but unless I was on my way to medical school or like on a path like in investment banking or something, it really, like, I was destined to be a lawyer. My dad is a lawyer. My grandpa was a lawyer. Both my uncles are lawyers. My mom worked in a law adjacent field, so she worked with a lot of lawyers. My second cousin, like my mom's cousins, all three of her first cousins are lawyers. So I just grew up among a lot of lawyers.
Yeah.
And it was, it's something that we've talked about this, right? Like, there was never really a question about whether I was going to go to college or whether I was going to go to graduate school. It's just like what college, what graduate school I was going to get into,
Yeah.
and how I was going to finance it. But it wasn't a question of, is this, I think back and like, I financed my entire law school education. When I was 23 years old, I signed loans for over $100,000. I mean, just
Right.
And I know I'm not unique. I mean, I know a lot of people do that without really connecting the dots.
Yeah.
And I, to Shira and others have helped me. I am grateful for my education. I think it has helped me kind of become a good advocate and certainly helped me get into teaching. I mean, it was teaching through another way, but
Yeah.
so yeah, I don't know. Um, I'm feeling I'm feeling less kind of eaten up by it than I have for a while. And so I think, oh, I forgot to say one other thing. So
Okay.
I think um I'm just going with that. So another thing and I imagine a lot of people kind of many age groups might experience this, but particular to kind of midlife or career change people, where they thought maybe they were going to do one thing for a long time and maybe they did do something, but then they do something else and maybe they want to do that other thing, but they're kind of feeling some sadness around it.
Yeah.
I also, not right now so much, but over the last few months, I experienced what I can only describe as grief
Yeah.
around that part of my career ending. Not that I wanted to do it or I wanted to be in court or I wanted to be working for a DV agency or anything like that, but more that I think it was twofold. One, that I was so hopeful that more would have changed
Yeah.
by now. And so that's kind of like, oh, you wanted to be a system change advocate and you were unsuccessful, which I mean, we could argue whether I was unsuccessful or not.
Okay.
Um, but also that I thought it was going to be forever.
Yeah.
And even though I think it might be like a divorce or something. Like you might not want to be married to someone, but you're still sad that the marriage is over,
Yeah.
right? Or you have a very elderly relative who's been very, very ill for a very, very long time, and you don't want them to suffer anymore, but you're still so sad when they die. Like I was sad about the ending,
Okay.
and I couldn't put words to it. And then finally one day I was like, wait, I think this might be grief. Because I was feeling like all the toots, like, why, like, what's going on? Like, why am I feeling so conflicted? I don't want to do this. Like, I want to try something new. I want to take the podcast in this direction. I want to focus on this. I want to kind of work on my business in this way.
Yeah.
And, and then I was like, oh, this is just grief. And like, wait,
Yeah.
what do they say? Like, you can't get around it. You have to go through it.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Right. You have to like
Absolutely.
wade through it.
Oh,
So I was like, oh, I'm just sitting in it now. Today I'm just sitting in it, but tomorrow maybe not.
right. No, it's so interesting because I keep coming across a lot about internalizing and externalizing in just various ways. And I've always been a very, very internal, like I mean a super internalizer for a number of reasons. But because of that, it's interesting because when I was home during the holidays, um, so my dad was the chief medical examiner in the county that we lived in. And when he retired, he's been having a lot of trouble with feelings of like where he fits in the world because he'll say things like, I used to be somebody and that sort of thing. And it's interesting because I don't ever have that feeling because I've done it all, it's all been internal facing, but I think we all still like find challenges and like that we're searching for something, whether or not we invalidate ourselves the right way or
Totally. And so there's no shame in that. There's no shame in either.
yeah.
Um, but so this is something, and maybe we'll want to edit it out, but I think it could be an interesting.
Huh.
So I was on a walk with a friend of mine yesterday who I hadn't seen in a while. She and I went to college together.
Okay.
And she was asking about kind of what I was doing. And I told her, and I was like, yeah, I'm taking the summer off from most of my consulting to really focus on the podcast.
Yeah.
And then in the fall, I'm going to be teaching a course, taking a course, and doing the podcast. Um, And if some kind of consulting work comes in, that's great, but and and she said, "Well, do you have to make money?"
Interesting question.
And so there's two things.
Yeah.
People have asked me this a lot in different ways.
Yeah.
So when we moved back to Boston in 2012 after I had a teaching fellowship in DC, I was unemployed for a period of time as I was looking for work.
Yep.
And I don't know if I ever told you the story, but we moved to the North Shore um, into a rental apartment my parents own. The rent was way cheaper than living in the city. We only had one income at the time. Josh was working. I wasn't. I was planning on working, but I wanted to see if we wanted to live by the water. I don't know. I was like had this idea of a simpler life. Um, and it was miserable. We really did not enjoy it, which actually was great learning for us because we ended up moving back into town. We were only there for 10 months and
Yeah.
have never looked back. But um and I had a really hard time meeting people in this small town. And so I started, Ella was in part-time daycare. She was in daycare like 9 to 1. And so I would drop her off, go work out, do like an exercise class, and then apply for jobs and then pick her up. That was kind of my schedule.
Okay.
And so I met a few women. I mean, nothing, I didn't know how to make friends.
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
and after a few months, I got a job and I said to the women, it was like a 3 day a week exercise class or something. I was like, guys, sorry, I'm like moving to the 5:30 a.m. class because I got a job.
Yeah.
And these two women were like, ooh, do you have to work?
Uh-huh.
And it was it was just such a strange, first of all, I mean, I didn't know them from, I mean, I literally had no, I don't even know if I knew their names. And I was like, yes, I have to work. And I
Yeah.
found that to be such an offensive question because people work for all sorts of reasons. And I actually did have to work for financial reasons, but like this idea of it was such a weird question. I found it so weird and such a good indicator of why I didn't fit in within that community.
Yeah.
And and then yesterday when my friend asked me, it was not the same, it wasn't the same kind of judgment. It was more kind of, Margo, are you putting too much pressure on yourself? You have a lot of other things going on. Like, do you need
Yeah.
to do this? And it just got me thinking. It came out of love, so it was not, I didn't find it offensive at all.
Okay.
But it got me thinking, like, would anyone ever ask you, Roger,
Right.
if you had to work?
Totally not. No. I mean,
Right? You and I have similar, like, obviously you do production and stuff, but you're in business for yourself. I'm in business for myself. You have
right.
a partner who works full time for an outside company. I have a partner who works full time for an outside company. Right. So,
Absolutely.
um, and it just was such an interesting moment where I was like, men don't have to defend their desire to exist
Yeah.
or doubt it. Like, does anyone ever make you feel like you should be home full time with Esme?
No, I get like the Father of the Year award for just
Did
walking
you
my
drop
son
her
around
off
the
at
block.
daycare? You
Yeah,
are a great dad.
totally. But
I have
it's
seen you in person,
oh,
but it is
just,
right?
yeah, the standard. I mean, it's ridiculous. The difference. I mean,
Right.
yeah,
And so I think it just made me think like, wow, we have so far to go in terms of
yeah,
people need to do things for all sorts of different reasons.
yeah, of
Um,
course.
and we never know exactly why people are doing things. And do we need to?
Yeah,
And so anyway, it just made me think like, yes, I have to work. Um, and no, I don't have to take every consulting job that comes my way. And I'm excited to take, so it was an interesting conversation. But to your point about, external, internal, I mean, if it were all external for me, I never would have left my job.
yeah.
And so,
And
that's
that's what I
another,
was curious about, just because you made such and people that, go to medical school for the same reasons. It's like, it's more than I could ever imagine doing for an external validation. But it's just because I work so differently, but it's just like, man, to go through that much. I mean, that's a lot.
It's a lot and it's hard
Yeah,
and it's really specific expertise that's in demand,
sure.
kind of. I
Yeah.
mean, I think we could have a whole other conversation about like what's remunerated and how things are remunerated and stuff. But
Sure.
so I don't know if I answered your question, but
I think I think we covered a lot of different,
yeah,
I don't
I
know,
think
it's interesting. I mean, it's not necessarily with the goal of like getting an answer. It's more of just like kind of talking through like how those things influence us and
so.
what
I
we've
I
done
think
that helps us
the
get through it.
yeah, I mean, I think the other thing that I imagine, and we're going to do an episode about a full length episode, I think, about this external versus internal, and the fact that our podcast is public, right? So
Mhm.
I think some people have gotten, well, look, I'm not going to comment on Tashira's motivation. Like, I think I know. I mean, we've talked a lot about why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Um, and the reason I'm doing it is because I want to normalize having hard conversations.
Yeah.
And I believe that there's a lot more advocacy that can happen when we join together and talk together versus talking in our own silos. So that's my motivation. And I feel like there is underrepresentation in the media for women of a certain age.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
So those are, and I like the creativity. I like working with you, Roger. I like working with Jashire, right? So
Sure.
there are lots of reasons, but I am not doing it to become like Instagram famous.
Right.
And, Instagram and social media are required now when you have a small business.
Yeah.
Um, and I think a lot of people who have really stable corporate jobs maybe don't know that or think
Yeah.
that people are just like playing on the internet,
Right.
or want attention. It's not an easy thing to gain followers or to get collaborations or
Right.
to understand the different algorithms or how
Yeah.
to post things or how to collaborate. I mean, all of these things are hard. And so there's it's been interesting because I don't know, I don't want to like assume what people think, but I think some people think like, oh, Margot's just like bored and playing on the internet.
Yeah. You mentioned when we were talking one day that you felt like you got feedback from folks who thought it was a vanity kind of project or
Yeah,
something.
and
And
I'm like past being offended by things really, because I really don't
sure.
think things are intentionally malicious, or people who I love would like want to hurt me. But I do think there's something interesting about how we define a real job.
Yeah.
Um, and whether that's changing or will that change with Gen Z.
Yeah.
Um, and how millennials or geriatric millennials are potentially part of the problem.
Thanks for listening to justUS. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you'd like to learn more about our podcast, be sure to check us out on our website at justuspodcast.com. You can also reach out to us there if you want to be featured on the show or if you have a business or a product that you think would be a good fit for our audience. Thanks again for listening.